Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast. Currently, actually, Seaweed Brain, a Kane Chronicles podcast, because we are still doing our read through of the Red Pyramid. Today, we are picking up at chapter 14 and learning a lot about history, burning people's eyebrows off. There's a lot going on, and we're going to have a good time together, really learning about magic and Egypt. Stick around.
Welcome back, everyone, to Seaweed Brain, live from the Duat, coming at you with a returning special guest who hasn't been here in a minute. We have Darien from the Muses of Mythology. Hi, Darien.
Hi! Yeah, the last time I was here, I got to talk about Persephone in The Sun and the Star.
Yes.
That's been a really long time!
Because it doesn't feel
more
like
than
that
a year
long,
ago.
but that was literally a year ago.
That was before the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wild
There is
time.
like
Incredible.
pre-show and post-show, and that's all that my brain can categorize the podcast into at this point.
No, the fandom it's a truly different space to exist in, which is fascinating, having been in this space since before, not like this same space, right? But like reading Percy Jackson, engaging it since like literally before Battle of the Labyrinth came out.
Yeah.
Like, my grandmother bought that for me at Barnes & Noble, so...
I think that's where my head goes to, is I'm thinking like, oh, all the content that is post Trials of Apollo is new, right? So it must have happened recently. I'm doing heavy air quotes here. But then, of course, over the past like 2 years, we've had 2 new books, a whole TV show. But of course, like the content never stopped. Like as Trials was happening, as Magnus was happening, he was still churning. Rick has never stopped producing content.
This man has never stopped.
Every time someone on Twitter is like, "We're so back," I'm like, y'all, some of us, we never
literally
left.
never left.
Everybody moved on, but we are still here.
Some of us were trying to tell our coworkers in our office job about the new Trials of Apollo book and then got embarrassed and stopped reading for a hot second, but came back around.
Darien, I have to say, I've thought about you a lot during our Live from the Duat era, because you're a famous sibling. And this is, of course, the series.
Oh my god! Wait, no, let me finish. Let me just spend some time in this space.
Anyone who isn't familiar with Muses of Mythology, Darien hosts Muses with their brother DJ, and there's lots of sibling banter. So before we dive into chapter 14 this week, do you want to say anything about your experience with Kane Chronicles, reading it, as a famous sibling growing up, or when you first came to it?
I was reading Kane Chronicles when it was released. I was on it. I was like, oh, done with Percy? Okay. But he's writing another book and it's Egyptian. Hell yes. Thank you so much. Carter, thank you for mentioning that giant golden Egyptology book in one of the early Into the Do What episodes. That just like inside outed me, where I just had that core memory in my hand and I'm like, yes, the golden book with the pretty fake gemstones and the texture. Yeah. And there's a lot about who I am is, wow, Egypt's so cool, huh? I care about this so much as a 7-year-old. So I actually, I was really into the Kane Chronicles when it was coming out the whole time. And I definitely liked him more now, rereading him, than I did initially. And I just think that's because I appreciate differences more than I did early on. But in regards to the sibling thing, I will have to say I am in the same club as Robert from the last episode, wherein, no, I do like Sadie more than Carter. Sorry, I know it's the cool thing to be a Carter defender, and I don't think he's a bad character, but I definitely was more of like, no, Sadie is so cool and neat, and also the girl. So
real.
Wait, I love this idea that we've established that like being a Carter defender is like somehow the elite moral truth that you should be able.
Aggressive. I think it's bold.
Yeah,
it reminds you of like Kierkegaard. When you look at a Carter defender, you're like, wow, that is the person who is so noble in their faith. They're so bold as to walk a path that no one around them can be explained.
Wait, but we hate comparing ourselves to Kierkegaard. Isn't that like, did we do an entire project about that senior year of high school?
We are not soaring flying over here. It's true.
Soaring flying. That was the whole thing.
Yes.
I don't think this is going to make sense to anyone.
It's a funny joke because it's referencing High School Musical, but also because there's a thing through the O in Soarin' that looks like you're flying.
So we would stick our arms out diagonally and go soaring, flying, Kierkegaard.
The thing about the question you just asked me about, famous siblings doing the having the sibling thing, that dynamic, is that, and when y'all have been talking about the sibling dynamic, it makes me feel like do Erica and Carter recognize their relationship from the outside? Because I know you are not siblings, but simultaneously, you have spent so much of your life together and have been so close through developmental years that I feel like you are allowed to have, we also have sibling bond. Like, we have been through shared lifetime traumas, and we have, like, you two just did this arm thing side by side in absolute unity, where if I made fun of you, both of you would be like, how dare you? That was important to us. We care about it so much. You could never understand, which is like very adult sibling relationship energy.
That is so interesting. I think we could take a moment to meditate on this because I have a larger age gap between me and my siblings. So I never really thought of like a sibling relationship as being a close relationship, you know? Like in my perspective, siblings are people that you like have around and your friendship kind of comes in and out, you know, right? Like
yes.
some years you're closer than others. And
For sure.
friends are much closer than siblings,
Yes.
right? Or like I spent more time with Carter than I ever spent with my sisters.
No, and that's
So I feel like I get what you're saying. If I spin the definition of siblings to mean something closer than friendship, I suppose. But to me, friends are always closer than your siblings.
That also, I understand that I'm the eldest of my sibling group growing up. It was me and then my three brothers. The brother I co-host the podcast with is 5 years younger than me. But I have a brother who's 1 year younger than me, a brother who's 6 years younger than me, and now I have like two half siblings who are about 5 and 6 younger than me, and then a half brother who just turned 13. So the relationship I had with my brothers when I was younger definitely was like, we hang out over the summers. We gotta like stick together. I was closer to my friends growing up. But as an adult, I'm like, no, my brothers are my best friends. Like all of my brothers I'm very close to now and feel like I have a rapport with them that even for like my friend Lucy, who's my best friend, who I do Aragon and Back Again with, my bond with her is distinctly different than my bond with DJ or my bond with my other brothers. And I just read a lot of that bond I have with my brothers when I watch you two interact.
Aw, Carter and I are so brothers. It's real. I'm Carter's brother. Let's be real.
Yes.
I do think we can spin this into Red Pyramid a little bit because in this section, we do learn a little bit from Sadie that she doesn't consider herself to be somebody who has a lot of friends. And Carter definitely doesn't have any friends his own age. So the way that their relationship develops as siblings and as friends simultaneously, inextricably, is what we see, I think, from them.
Yeah, no, I think especially growing up, the thing that defines, I feel like, sibling relationship is the complex navigating of your parental figures, whoever that is. Having that and then having this relationship that like your relationship with your parent is different than your sibling's relationship with your parent and that relationship and how that works. But Carter and Sadie don't have that here. Like they don't have their, even like Uncle Amos is just gone, missing in JJ. We don't know. This is hints that something's wrong. But they're friends and siblings because not having any sort of parental unit, any sort of like adult supervision that you like automatically adhere to and like crave like affection and protection from your parental figures, not having that as part of like them trying to navigate as siblings, it makes it a very unique sibling relationship that I feel like friendship falls into a lot.
I think that's right. There are aspects of their relationship that reminds me of like me and my younger sister when we were roughly the same age as they are. But there are also a lot of moments that are much closer to what it's like when we're around now as like full adults who sometimes will hang out and are not doing so within particularly the confines and relational structures of being an immediate nuclear family, you know, like which is sometimes they'll hang out without our parents, and like the dynamics are very different. But I think there are a lot of moments that because Carter and Sadie aren't with their parents and they really are just two people who have a certain rough memory of being together kind of a long time ago, but are now just two people trying to figure out what that looks like now. I think there are a lot of echoes of that now where like literally it is true that we could have whatever relationship we want to have as adults. Like there's no particular rule, law, guideline saying you'll hang out this many times, especially without your parents. It's up in the air.
No one's enforcing family gatherings.
Exactly. You're kind of like choosing to be friends with this person because you happen to know a lot of things mutually, but also you could not.
I think as an adult, that's something what I really deeply appreciate about my brothers that I didn't as a kid. Like, how many times my dad would be like, they're the only ones that'll be there for you. And I'm like, whatever, Dad. I watch TV. I know BFFs are for life. But no, like, getting to make the choice of, I am going through something that's really hard right now. I'm going to call my brother and be like, hey, can I talk to you about this? And like, I'm just on a long commute. I'm going to call Jared and be like, hey, man, how'd you torture your manager today? Or I'm planning a trip. I should invite my brothers. Hey, do you want to go to Disneyland with me? And like, get to, like you said, make that choice to be with each other. And I think it's kind of cool through the series that we see Carter and Sadie essentially get to make that choice at such a young age with how everything happened.
Yeah.
Like, yes, they're siblings, but as things progress, like, there are some elements where is Good Omens too toxic to reference right now? We choose our side, I feel like, is what Carter and Sadie, if that may be getting into things that happen too much later on, but like, whatever happens, things that go off, like the whole world, and it does end up just being the two of them being like, no, we are on our side. Whatever happens, we've got this together. And it makes me very happy to see that. Because there are not very many good sibling dynamics in books growing up.
I would have to agree. Yeah.
Shall we, chapter 14 then?
Probably
all of that in mind. Get back into the Hall of Ages, Carter's POV, chapter 14, a French guy almost kills us.
As they are wont to do.
Yes, as they are wont to do. We get this big interactive museum exhibit Sparks Note montage of Egyptian history in this chapter, which is, I thought was a very fun way of taking us through the entirety of ancient Egyptian history as they walk through the Hall of Ages.
It's fun. It's interactive. I think that a critique that we've kind of been circling around that this brings to mind is some idea that certain cultures and certain civilizations exist as pieces of history. And I think that this particular artifact is something that's very useful. And a lot of the book won't probably make sense as much unless you find a place to pause and actually give you the kingdoms of ancient Egypt to make a point about a historical transition between the age of gods and the age of pharaohs. Those things are very useful. I do think it is a curious choice to end the Hall of Ages. Okay, they say that the Hall of Ages moves up into the present, but we don't have it really described in anything close to the same way after the fall of the Roman Empire, or even after the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the conquering by the Romans of Egypt. There's very brief descriptions of like certain ethnic groups come in, different people are in charge of Egypt different times, but that is something that I think raises a lot of questions. Like, what are the connections between different modern day peoples and the historical legacies of Egypt as this river civilization, one of the oldest that had these different kingdoms, but also has subsequently had lots of different migration patterns through the land over time and has had its cultural and physical artifacts move in so many different ways to different areas and to influence different cultures throughout the 2,000-3,000 year history since it was conquered.
It's interesting that we don't see anything after the Ptolemaic period.
No specific examples, just like you said, Carter, vibes, but not like a scene to like demonstrate what the present looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the most notable thing that we get out of this section is the Moses name drop, right?
Oh, yeah.
Moses was the only like mortal to ever defeat the magicians, according to the lore of the Kane Chronicles.
They don't say that. They say specifically the only foreigner ever to defeat the house in a battle, which is implying that Moses has access to a different magical system. And it's the only time that such an instance rivals to the power and magic system of the House of Life.
The right inverse of madness.
No.
Jesus is going to come in with his Moses powers.
I this was the thing. I was like, I need to step and take a minute and go look up the book of Exodus. And I need to read these passages with Moses having a Yu-Gi-Oh battle. The clearest memory I have of it is from DreamWorks' Prince of Egypt. So I just want to
just about to make the same reference. Yes.
And listen, you can't say it's the best song because all the songs are good. They're all too good. Carter, would you actually like to describe what was happening for folks who maybe are not weirdly intimately familiar with the book of Exodus?
like the entire scope of the Book of Exodus.
No, just the scene with the magician.
I mean, this is referencing a specific confrontation that Moses has with a sorcerer for the Pharaoh of Egypt, where they both produce snakes, right? And the snake that Moses produces destroys.
Yes.
I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Eats, right? The other snake. And this is before we then get the plagues, and then we get the actual leaving of the Jewish people from Egypt out of slavery.
Yeah.
It always blows my mind how Carter knows more about the Bible than I do, even though I was the one who went to Christian school.
I was the one who saw the DreamWorks film, I guess. So, you know.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, do you know Pharaoh? Whoa, baby, let my people go.
No, you can't just trigger me like that, Erica. You have to content warning before you do Bible church camp songs.
Ooh, VBS.
Okay. Yeah, I have no reference for that. Wow. I have a reference for Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. That one I think we all have a reference for. But yeah. That was another reference to the Prince of Egypt. But
there you go. It's the Moses rolls up and he's like, you're gonna let the enslaved Jewish people go, or the Israelis go. But God has also told Moses in advance that he's like, I am going to harden the Pharaoh's heart against you. So this just isn't going to work, but you are going to do this anyway, because the point of this section is to demonstrate how I am more powerful than the gods of Egypt. Because the pharaohs aren't doing like not the pharaoh, the magicians in the Book of Exodus in these chapters, chapter 7 and 8. It's not suggested that they're doing trickery. It's not supposed to be charlatan. Like, it says their secret arts, their enchantments, their secret magics. It is meant to imply that these are things that they are creating snakes out of their staffs. They are creating blood out of water as Moses is doing. But because Moses is channeling capital G God, he is doing this he is far more powerful. Because it's the thing that, and this I'm only speaking as modern day Christians, nothing about Jewish texts or anything like that, but how modern day Christians really want to be like, no, but the Bible says there is only one God. And it's like, actually, it never says that. What it says is that this God is the most powerful God, but it actually never says the other gods aren't real. And this whole text is meant to demonstrate how this God is more powerful than all these pagan gods. And you can cut that if that's too controversial for your show. Not your show.
It's controversial. I think that is important lore. It dovetails. I mean, like, everyone, it sounds like Dan is on the same page about what happened here.
Yes.
They might use slightly different words, but there are like so many accounts throughout history, right, of people, like, as Christianity was trying to expand its physical geographic footprint, there being instances of not only, of course, different pagan histories, rituals, etc., being sort of enfolded into Christianity's cultural history, but also these instances of people saying some version of my God is more powerful. My God can defeat your belief system, which is a different kind of invalidation from saying there's only one source of power. And also, like, as people who were alive in the 90s, if only even a little bit, I think we have a memory of more instances of these, like, devil panics, which are, I think, also implicitly embracing some level of an idea that there are other power systems, that there are other ways of doing things that are supernatural outside of adherence to the ways of a monotheistic deity.
Yeah.
All of which is a fascinating passage that does set us up very well for the Rider Verse of Madness.
Fascinating passage that sets us up well for the Rider Verse of Madness. And once again, if this one section was able to convince my Christian elementary school librarians that I was allowed to read this book, then great.
Yes, that is
thank you, Riordan.
Rick Riordan does make a point to do this in his books. Like in Camp Half-Blood, it's a little lighter, where they're just like, no, we don't mean capital G God. This is something else. Don't worry about that. And in this one, it's like, but Moses absolutely bested the Egyptian gods, so don't worry about that. And in the Magnus books, it's like, Thor's still salty because Jesus wouldn't arm wrestle him, so don't worry about that.
I completely forgot about that one. That's a really good one. I still can't wait to meet Jesus.
I'm very excited.
Maybe in the Wrath of the Triple Goddess. Maybe Jesus can duel Hecate.
I was recently explaining that whole plot arc of Sabrina the Teenage Witch to somebody. Sorry, not Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Sabrina, comma, the Chilling Adventures of. Oh, yes.
Anyway, we're moving through history. That was Moses. There are some quick notes about the different sections being categorized by different moods, vibes, key moments. Worth noting that the Ptolemaic section, the Greek section after Alexander the Great, is noted to be sad, fast. And this is something that is actually important to the lore of this. It's not just Rick having a commentary about colonialism, although perhaps that is also there. It is not just an accurate reflection of, I think, the consensus of historians about the political vitality of Egypt at different points in history, although I think it does reflect that consensus pretty well. We're going to get to a conversation between the chief and Sadie later on that is going to basically reflect this idea and is going to draw upon this view of Egyptian history as having this arc from strength to periods of weakness that actually materially impacts the lives of our protagonists, which is nice, which is fun. Where are we going from here? That's history.
Yeah, has that wrapped up the Hall of Ages?
That's basically wrapped up the Hall of Ages,
Yeah.
at the end of which is sitting the chief lector Iskandar. I hope we're pronouncing that right.
Iskandar stands, rise. Iskandar stands.
I really like
Iskandar Hive?
him. No,
I am so Iskandar Hive. Are you kidding me?
Are we talking about the book, or is this a youth reference I don't understand?
No, it
No,
is
I'm talking
just about this book
literally
character.
just this character.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure. You seem so excited that I'm like, sometimes I don't know what Erica and Carter are talking about. I am 30, so...
I get so excited when there's like a really old, leathery, dusty mentor character who's going to treat every 12-year-old girl like his great-great-great-great-granddaughter.
Yes, no, this is true. I too love him. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding the assignment.
Yes, no, he
is
just
one of the
appears in these
better-
2 chapters and makes a great indelible mark on my
Yeah,
psyche.
I think that's right.
And visually.
And he doesn't. I think leaving is a great part of how he places well relatively within this canon of old men who are mysteriously more powerful than everybody. You know, he gets in, gets out. That's plus points.
That's so important. Doesn't overstay his welcome.
Respects girls and also women. Like, wow, already you are in a league of your own, basically. How many times have we seen that happen? Almost none. Respects specifically Zia more than he respects Carter and Sadie. Also, in my view, plus many points. Because you should, frankly, care more about someone who has more knowledge and training and who you have no longer, more than these other people, just because of, I don't know, who they're related to or who's inside of them, or, you know, you still have to
also potentially, arguably respects Zia more than he does the second in line Frenchman.
The Frenchman.
Desjardins.
There it is.
Desjardins is an enemy. He's an opponent. He is clearly mistranslating what the lector says, bullying children.
This outline says, Desjardins, the Saison Marguerite mother bleeper.
Yes. That is another reference that I think people are losing, which is, of course, the most popular girls in school, which we probably have referenced on this podcast before. It's a YouTube series that we, of course, cannot fully endorse because there are certain dated ideas, because it is a period piece. It is reflecting early 2010s culture. But there's a moment where Desjardins is translating for the lector, and he needs to say something in French about how he's not sure what word is best for the translation. I have no patience for that. You knew the word.
How do you say?
Why do you say how you say when you clearly know exactly what you're going to say? He's doing it as a way to remind people that he's cultured and that he knows other languages. And, you know, if it were a different person, I might be like, okay, yeah, flex on them. Remind them. You are multicultural. In this case, no. Come on. I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. We know where your multilingual abilities come from, okay? We're not going to pretend.
We read the entire book and we still haven't talked about it,
We
Carter.
still haven't done a Patreon episode about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was CBB bonus episode win.
Yeah, we really need to talk about it.
We need to circle back for that one because the homosexuality, wow, it was strong with that one.
Yeah, there was a lot of homosexuality.
Hey, can I promo the Seaweed Brain Patreon just real quick?
Yes.
Y'all's episode of Acolyte was incredible. I have not watched Acolyte, and I meant to. I just haven't watched anything Star Wars for a while now because of an ex. Don't worry about it. But
Darien, that's literally so relatable.
I know. I listened to your Acolyte episode. I understand. But it was so good. And even if I wasn't planning on watching it, I absolutely will now. And every CBB listener who hasn't forked over the cash to get in on that, you should, if just for more Erica and Carter, because why wouldn't you want that in your life? But it was great, and I just wanted to tell you both thank you.
Aw, we had so much fun making that.
Patreon.com/seaweedbrain. There are some important things that we find out in this scene, like the fact that Julius broke the rules of the House of Life not once but twice. The first time was summoning all those gods when Mrs. Kane died, and the second was at the museum at the start of the book. We've kind of known this as we've been reading, but I think this is an important confirmation that the House of Life very much fights gods. This is a quote. So, I don't want to do the accent. I can't. So, Desjardins said coldly, you admit to consulting with gods. That makes our investigation much easier. Bast is not your friend. The gods caused the downfall of Egypt. It is forbidden to call on their powers. Magicians are sworn to keep the gods from interfering in the mortal world. We must use all our power to fight them. Bast said you were paranoid, Sadie added. So the House of Life is very much actively fighting the gods.
It's not just that they can. It's that it's kind of at this point their whole thing.
That's their job. It's the one thing they do.
But at the same time, we don't trust Desjardins implicitly. So whose side are we on? We don't know yet, right?
We don't know whose side we're on. I do think that this raises important questions that have been building this whole time. We're inclined to trust Bast. Bast seems likable. Desjardins is not likable. But I think also it is worth pausing because also it's not just Desjardins saying this by himself. He's saying this partially as he is 50% translating for Chief Lector Iskandar, who seems like a lovely old man who respects women and girls, you know? So I think that there is a reason for us to have pause to question maybe Bast's whole deal in history, because just because you're likable doesn't necessarily mean that you're morally right. What's the exact quote? I have like a strong vision of Ladybird in the moment where she yells at the anti-abortion lady.
Oh.
Just because something's ugly doesn't mean it's morally wrong. You know, just because Bast is slayful and Desjardins is a loser does not mean that the gods did not cause the downfall of Egypt. You know, we're gonna maybe look for more on that.
But it's so interesting because we just literally went through our Crash Course Egyptian History series down the long hall.
Yes.
And when Sadie and Carter are getting swept up initially and they want to look at the images, and Zia is like, no, we gotta go. Largely because it's like you're looking at the age of gods. You can't look at that, it'll tear your mind apart. And so later on when we're claiming like, oh, the gods are the reason Egypt fell, it's like, I just saw the history and the gods didn't seem to have gotten mentioned again right at the end.
That is a good point. Where were the gods in the Ptolemaic age is a question that we are going to be coming back to later on.
I also want to say, I think we glossed over this last week. Bast died, as far as we know. Sadie thinks Bast died protecting them. So that's something to keep in mind about Sadie's mental health state right now. And also, can gods die? Probably they can't, but we think that Bast is dead right now. Zia also lets it slip that other gods are escaping around the world from artifacts, quote, like a chain reaction. Oh boy, sounds like we're gonna have some fighting to do. And then Desjardins refers to Carter and Sadie as, quote, a contamination that, quote, must be contained. And this was my final straw from him.
We're all
I
gonna
was
say
officially
it.
done
We
with
think
him
that
at
this
point.
man is racist.
Is racist.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
No,
definitely.
Does he say anything particularly that reveals a specific racial animus? Not necessarily. You know, what's going through his head at this point is that he's probably, at this point, pretty sure that Carter and Sadie are hosts for gods and that that's bad. At the same time, there's certain words and phrases that you shouldn't say in certain contexts. And I think that this is one of those situations where he said something that was wrong. That was morally wrong for him to have said. Yeah.
On that note of the undertones of the way this French man, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I don't respect him, is communicating information, the things he says to his Sadie and Carter. When he talks about their father and what happened to like the Cain parents at the Cleopatra's Needle when they first tried to release some gods, he says like, your father broke the rules twice. Like first at Cleopatra's Needle when your mother was assisting him. And that felt like a very specific way to describe Mama Cain's role.
I agree.
It wasn't her, the white lady. She was just helping this guy. He was truly the mastermind behind this breaking of our sacred laws. And I'm like, that feels like, one, racist, two, not giving this woman the credit she deserves.
Yes, very suspect, especially considering what we're about to learn about the actual respective roles in the ideation of this plan. Very, very suspect.
All around negative 100 points for Desjardins. 100 points, however, for Iskandar and his relationship with Zia. Quote, yes. The old man finally looked up. He smiled at Zia with true affection. For a second, I wondered if she were his great-great-granddaughter or something. He spoke in Greek, and Zia bowed deeply. Desjardins looked ready to explode. He swept his robes away from his feet and marched behind the throne.
See, unfortunately, with the robes thing, we are starting to cross back over a little bit into where we don't like him. We've just said all the reasons why he's problematic. However, a cape twirl, that's like plus 10 points, maybe plus 20. I have to see what the cape looks like. You know, is it lined? Is it the right length?
Yeah,
But
so he's at a negative 80 now instead of a negative 100.
I recently had a long discussion with somebody about whether or not we need to bring queer-coded villains back, and I think it was based on something brewing in the, YouTuber video essayist space of trying to tap back into that conversation. And I'm just going to leave that
It was
there.
just about to mention Disney villains, so yeah, I get that.
The cape flip upon exiting does raise some questions.
He's also French, so
Gay
Gay
or
or
European.
Yeah, not to. That's the end of that chapter, though.
Well, now they have to get tested.
For magic. We're testing them for magical abilities and finding out what all went down.
Yeah, we have to find out what midichlorian count they have in their blood.
Did y'all want to do another break?
I think it's time for a break in between chapters, yeah.
Money.
I
was going to say, speaking of our Patreon episode on the Acolyte, if you ever show up to an institution where they're like, hey, we like to test young children for their magical abilities, and then we like to keep them in our ranks and train them from a young age, I think you should be suspect about that.
Yeah.
And what the institution stands for, and how these children are receiving care, perhaps. We should be wary.
And with that, it's chapter 15, Godly Birthday Party.
A godly birthday party.
I love this chapter.
Sadie's POV.
What is the godly birthday party thing a reference to? Is that a particular opening of a portal, or is that just the demon days as a whole?
That's the vision.
It's the vision. It's the vision. It's the historical vision. That's my bad.
Yeah.
All right.
I wanted to shout out that this chapter starts with Sadie saying, they took Carter to a different dormitory, so I don't know how he slept, but I couldn't get a wink. And this may seem like nothing, but I thought this was so sweet because later on in this chapter, she's like, oh, there's Carter. He has crazy bedhead. He doesn't look like he slept very well last night. And despite not growing up together, I just think that is like such a small but significant way of demonstrating how much she cares for him, in like a familial way that she's like, I don't know how Carter slept because we weren't in the same room.
Yeah.
So because they're going to get tested, Sadie is, quote, imprisoned in a nursery school dungeon with all the other baby Jedis who are in training here. And so she ends up sneaking out to return to the Hall of Ages because she can't sleep. And she uses her magic word powers this time, like very intentionally and calmly, getting the door to open, which is, I think, important for her because she's leveling up clearly. And as she's kind of walking through, she mentally revisits the argument that she had with Carter at the Met, where Carter is like, you had it better, you had like friends. You had a regular life. Yeah. And of course her friends are named the most British names you could possibly think of, Liz and Emma.
It is very British. Those are both like the names of British queens, right?
Those are names of Jane Austen characters.
Also that,
I was thinking Jane Austen, personally. And in this moment, as she's thinking about this argument, this is where we get Sadie's, I don't know if I want to say like mantra or like manifesto, like current guiding life principle that she tells us, which we could have, assumed, but it's really nice to hear coming out of her own perspective. And I think, again, about the fact that this is like a voice recording turned into a book and what it must be like for Carter to hear Sadie say this out loud in this moment. Quote, I was always the different girl, the mixed race girl, the American who wasn't American, the girl whose mother had died, the girl with the absent father, the girl who made trouble in class, the girl who couldn't concentrate on her lessons. After a while, one learns that blending in simply doesn't work. If people are going to single me out, I might as well give them something to stare at. Red stripes in my hair? Why not? Combat boots with the school uniform? Absolutely. Headmaster says, I'll have to call your parents, young lady. I say, good luck. Carter didn't know anything about my life.
Erica, it's an honor watching you perform.
Please don't say that. Please don't act like that was good. I want to have a little conversation about this whole sentiment because for the era we grew up in, which was this era when this book happened at this exact age, this was very tangible, real, relatable, important, physically grabbable. This idea of like, I can't fit in, so I'm going to do everything I can to stand out.
Yeah.
With the combat boots and the school uniform. And is this still a thing?
I think the aesthetics would be different.
Yes.
Sadie is in a very particular between Avril Lavigne and Tumblr point in cultural history. Where I do think that Rick, this is still at a point in time where I think that his hold of like current popular aesthetics is still relatively close. But I even think like at the level of a broader sentiment about conformity, I think you're right. I think that this might not be the way that the children are processing these types of things now. That there's less of a divide between people who stand out and people who don't, as relatively binary categories.
Yeah, it's definitely feels more just what I viewed in the very, very small lens of like where I work at a local junior high and the after school program of the kids that you being in that environment can tell which ones are in the in crowd and are accepted by their peers and their teachers very well, and the kids who are not. And it isn't quite the, oh, I can clock it. You've got the alt fashion, you've got the hair. Like the kids who are in the in crowd also, like everyone is wearing Crocs these days. Everyone's got.
That's it. That's the lesson that I needed to learn. Nobody is like wearing combat boots or not wearing combat boots. It's just that everyone's wearing Crocs.
They're all wearing Crocs.
That was my question. Yeah.
The fashion distinguishers aren't the same, but it is the hobbies, the interests, the socialization is the obviously these kids aren't, so I am going to still stand out, but by not liking the things that the popular kids like, not necessarily with the physical. But again, this isn't just the one very small sample I have. It just so happens to be the age demographic.
Totally. If you're a young person or an educator of young people, let us know. What is it like for the 12-year-olds these days? I'm so curious because this, like, when I read this, I'm literally like, yes, like this was our experience, like full 2010 nostalgia. And I just wonder how it hits for young people these days.
I think we were kind of at the point where it was crossing over, though. Do you know what I mean? Where I think with the advent of Tumblr, you get the first moment where these things become signifiers of power as much as they become signifiers of rebellion. It's, I think, the early phases of that transition, co-optation, arguably, where Vivienne Westwood aesthetics are for everybody type of...
The counterculture becoming the culture.
Yeah. I feel like the thesis statement of Tumblr was like, if you're... like, you have to find your way to do your own thing, but also the thing that everyone else is doing. Like, everyone is rebelling together, but then it becomes circular really quick. But yeah.
So as Sadie enters back into the Hall of Ages, she has like a vision or she sees something. And my main question about this is someone showing this to her? You know, like, is the Hall of Ages manufacturing this, or did she just stumble into this? Or why is she seeing this at this particular time? Like, how does the hall work exactly?
Very convenient vision to have.
I actually think she went back in time.
Yes.
They describe her ba, because the mysterious, handsome 16-year-old, let's put a pin in that, does ask, hey, are you a ghost? So, and when she doesn't respond, he's like, okay, are you a ba? Okay, well, don't interrupt anything that's going on here. Like, you're probably not supposed to be here.
Yes.
But if it was a vision, no one would interact with her.
The lector does also say something about time travel. That her... well, there's like multiple components of spirit, so it's a little bit oversimplifying, but her boss specifically does, in Lecter's accounting, travel. In the Lecter's accounting. I keep forgetting that this is like a title and not a first name. But in the Lecter's accounting, her ba does travel through time to the Age of the Gods, where she witnesses the titular birthday party that I temporarily forgot about as we began this section of the episode.
Also, this event is like one of the most... it's where it's like, this is the most foundational story in Egyptian mythology, because it's like, well, like, was it? Like, probably, but like, in the thing we have managed to piece together 5,000 years later, I feel like I'm really in the habit of doing that caveat on Muses right now, because we're talking about Norse mythology. I feel like I constantly have to do a caveat like that when I make any blanket statement about it. But this, what happens with Iris, Osiris, and Set right here is like big. Is like big, and it's like the story almost.
I think that's right.
Should we revisit that pin real quick?
Let's unpin.
I turned and saw a good-looking boy. I'm sorry, I keep deciding when and I'm going to and when I'm not going to do the accent, but I'm done with it for today. Quote, I turned and saw a good-looking boy of about 16, dressed in black robes. His complexion was pale, but he had lovely brown eyes like the man on the throne. His black hair was long and tousled, rather wild, but it worked for me. ... I tried to think of something to say. Excuse me? Hello? Marry me?
I love this. I genuinely
find
this so delightful. And remember, being at that age, for the Riordan verse in particular, to get a first-person girl's perspective being boy crazy is very unique. I think this is the only time this happens.
This was the first time, at least.
Certainly the first time.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a moment for me where it's like, there's really something happening here. This is, wow, she's telling stories. She's speaking truths.
There is an overarching plot through these books that I have, to quote a movie that exists in the world, very strong feelings about, but I'm not sure if they're positive or negative, good or bad. It swings back and forth on how I feel about this plot. I have complicated feelings where I have been on other shows. I've been on the Best Damn Camp Pod more than once to really break down what I feel about this plot.
Yeah.
But I've never actually gotten to be on it when it starts, and I would hope I get to someday get to express my feelings about the end of the plot.
I'm going to have to agree with that there are questions, but wow. The spark, the actual energy, excitement, palpable. It's tough.
And he's the only one that sees her. He's the only one that acknowledges her.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
While we're here in Sadie's perspective and we've just met this person for the first time, so real.
Yes.
So true. So 12-year-old girl, universal experience, like that tall, pale boy with the dark hair. Oh my gosh, like sparks fly, enchanted.
And he notices her. He literally is the only one who notices her. Excuse me? Wow. That's...
Yeah. From his point of view, excuse me, stay away from her, get a job.
Je telephone the police. Yeah.
And I have a feeling he's not going to, based on my vague recollection of what goes forward in these books and what Darien is saying. I have a feeling he's going to stay unemployed and near to her, unfortunately.
As opposed to following Demi Lovato's directions, you mean?
Yes. Get a job and stay away from her.
It's so weird. But also this right here with her being in the past, it's like it gives Hal's Moving Castle.
Oh.
And I'm like, Rick, how dare you?
I'm sorry I can't be everything to you. I'm sorry I'm not Howl's Moving Castle. Have you seen that tweet? It's literally the most important tweet of 2024, I think.
It's quite foundational, actually. Yeah.
Anyway, we're worried about this, but for now...
Yes, but he does leave her alone. He walks away. He just disappears.
I do have to ask, briefly, we are in Egypt in the, 5000 BCE era. Why is he pale? Why is he pale? Do we get an explanation for this? How is he...
I think it's because it was 2010.
Either not dying or not tanning.
He's going to end up having, like, death powers, right? This is the death god. Everybody knows if you're the death god, you gotta be pale.
He's, like, underground, I guess.
In this scene, she sees, like, her mother, she sees an Isis, and she sees her father in Osiris, so it also begs the question, like, what is Sadie actually seeing?
Yeah, how much of this is her? How much of this is her?
Yeah, is she truly just seeing the face of Harry Styles?
Onto...
Help, my mom sold me to One Direction.
We can get into the vision a little bit.
These are all really good questions.
This is... The vision is broadly the story of Osiris getting trapped and kidnapped by Set in the magical coffin. As we mentioned, Sadie does see flashes of her mother in Isis, flashes of her father in Osiris. The Isis thing is especially fascinating. We'll have to... I think that's one that I'm going to put a pin in, and that this book is going to talk a little bit more about in a way that I think, to me, still leaves other questions that we will be able to ask when we get there. For now, fascinating that she sees her mother in Isis. We also meet Set. This is interesting. I don't know how everybody else felt about this. I think we've met Set before in the real world. We're seeing Set personified differently here and being described very differently, where Sadie is afraid of him. There is evil in his eyes. There's anger. There's all this stuff. But there are also these interesting, to an extent countervailing, to an extent softening descriptors about how Set has a very gregarious, infectious laugh, and how he's able to quickly win people over and joke with them. I found this to be a really interesting description, and then I had to pause and be like, is this actually interesting, or is this every trickster god ever? I kind of came down at the end of that on the side of, no, there is something unique about Set as a character and this characterization, but I'd be curious to hear other people's thoughts.
No, I think you're right. Like I said, Muses were doing Norse stuff, so I spent like a lot of time around Loki recently, and the trickster god with like, but everyone like loves me anyway. I'm such like, ain't I a stinker? That's more of a Bugs Bunny thing than like an mostly traditional trickster. Like I feel like mostly traditional trickster gods, the people around them, like they fall for their tricks because they're gullible. not necessarily because they like and trust the deity, the figure that they're interacting with. Like,
yeah.
Loki sucks not most of the time, just like the one time where he really fucked up and everyone hates him. But in other times, he's just being like, hey, I've got a way to solve this problem, and it's a wild solution, but bear with me, it's totally gonna work, guys. But he's rarely, again, in the Eddas, that the thing that Set has, like you just said, Carter, where it's like infectious and people are drawn to him and they want to hang out with him, even though he's a little bit like, ooh, this dude's got some menace. At the same time, everybody wants to play this party game.
Yes.
Like, everyone is like, hell yeah, I want to play the party box game. Even Osiris is like, I'll play the party box game.
Yeah.
And Isis is like, please don't play the party box game, babe.
His energy, I think, is not actually trickster. It's closer to something like quarterback of the football team almost, because you get the sense that he's strong and he's like down the line. He's not really even, it's almost a stretch to call it a trick, because what he's actually doing is basically just saying, I'm fun. I'm not even going to try to fool you. You should just get in the box, because we all kind of want you to get in the box.
Just get in the box.
You know?
It is wild. Because Set is not a trickster god, like
He's
in the
not.
classification of like
He's just
what a deity. He's a chaos
and charismatic,
god. Yeah,
and kind of chaotic. Exactly. That we're like where it really goes off the edge towards evil deviousness is that he will do things that people don't want him to do, but it's not that they're surprised.
He creates chaos.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we see. Like, there's the party, there is order. That is what Osiris is. It's because the Egyptian books, in these ones, it is not good versus evil. It is order and chaos and trying to identify it. And what he does here, I mean, it's pretty evil to murder your brother, right? And then try to kill his wife so she doesn't have her baby. But, like, it has also created chaos. It undermined the order and expectation of, like, the lineage of pharaohs. And now Isis has to deal with that problem.
But we're also going to get other representations of the forces of chaos that are notably different in this book series, because Egyptian thought systems are all about the organization between order and chaos. I still think that, like, in those comparisons especially, Set is really unique. Like, Set is not going to be like the other forces of chaos that we see.
Yeah, I absolutely see what you are saying, Carter, because I'm like, yes, like, the intention of the way Set is being described here, even though he is currently our antagonist, he is a #problem, right? He's also a problem that Frenchman didn't want to believe when they said they saw Set. So let's remember he did that. That was, but making him likable is like, is something that I think Rick Riordan intentionally did here for things that are like, this is the overarching story, not just this one book.
I think we should wrap up and get out of this vision.
Osiris loses the party box game. That's important. And then she's in Isis's head as Isis is fleeing. And that's also important.
Fascinating. There is one more thing I want to put a pin in, which is that a woman shows up and tackles Set to prevent him from murdering Isis.
Just clotheslines him.
And that is something that we're definitely going to want to put a pin in.
His wife. He does acknowledge it's his wife.
Yes, he does say that it's his wife and that he's not sure where her loyalties. That's a very fascinating dynamic that we're going to have to put a pin in, because we simply don't have enough information to say more at this point.
No.
But we're going to follow that space. Sadie exits the dream.
The last thing she hears, though, is, "You must escape," the voice of Iris said in my mind. "Avenge Osiris, crown Horus king." Triple, quadruple pin in that one.
Yeah. Wow. We have a lot of pins. Don't move too much.
Yeah.
We have to finish our tailoring.
It's a tomato.
So much information. So Iskandar rescues Sadie, and they have like a lovely little debrief.
He's so charming. He seems actually like a nice old man.
Yeah,
Forgive the interruption,
so nice.
but you were dying.
Forgive the interruption, but you were almost dead, in perfect English. And Sadie's like, "Wait, you speak English?" And he's like, "How do you know you're not speaking Greek?"
That's really fun. I'm sorry.
It's like he just makes the Frenchman translate for him as a gag. Like, he's actually probably perfectly like, oh, I don't mind speaking like the language of whatever the person speaking to best understands. Like, that's fine. But it's really fun for me to make you be my translator, so I can just see how you'll say what it is I'm asking you to say as a constant, like, a test. Like, litmus. Yes, it's a constant litmus test
to keep him around.
Vibe check.
Yeah. And he gives us all of the useful, important context to what just happened. Quote, "As I said, an old story, but one that the gods have repeated many times in our history." Repeated, Sadie asks. "The gods follow patterns in some ways. They are quite predictable, acting out the same squabbles, the same jealousies down through the ages. Only the settings change, and the hosts." And Sadie's like, but there's all these different versions of the story, confusing. He says, this can be confusing for those who do not know the true nature of the gods. They cannot walk the earth in their pure form, at least not for more than a few moments. They must have hosts. Humans, you mean? Or powerful objects such as statues, amulets, monuments, certain models of cars, but they prefer human form. This is the big kicker. You see, gods have great power, but only humans have creativity, the power to change history rather than simply repeat it. Humans can, how do you moderns say it, think outside the cup.
That's some Terry Pratchett shit right there.
I said that's some Madeline Miller shit right there.
Hey, there we go. I just literally read like all the Tiffany Aching books for the first time, so I'm very into
In your Terry
Pratchett's
Pratchett
approach
era?
I'm in my Terry Pratchett era. It's wild that it took me this long. So, but and as I say, oh, that's a Terry Pratchett thing, but that's also a Rick Riordan thing. Like to take the humanity, and that's what is special in this world of magic. Like in this one, it's the human ability of imagination, of creativity, of creating something new, and the potential possibility. Over in the Percy Jackson books, it is the human spirit, the willingness to go up against the battle that will come back again and again, and not letting the storm overtake you. Like, I think that's remarkable and always super something that makes me so happy when I see it.
Yes, this is definitely the central thematic thread of the Riordan verse. It is a set of ideas that he's really interested in. I was struck by this with how unique it feels like this particular approach, this particular metaphor for this struggle feels in this context, where it is fundamentally the same idea that he's talking about, like the juxtaposition between humanness and that which is temporary and choice against these grand historic forces, these things that are greater than the self, almost the inevitability of history. It's that same thing, but the metaphor of the host, of like hosting a god, is so different and has such a unique flavor and perspective embedded in it as compared to what we've gotten from the idea of demigods. I found that stunning. Like, I genuinely, it's the central like metaphor of these books, the idea of hosting. So we're gonna keep following it, but this linkage clearly back to that overall ideological project is so striking, because he really, I think, is finding a new way to say related, but I think meaningfully different things about that same set of ideas, because of how different and how unique of a metaphor he chose in hosting.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, like, speaking as like as another split that makes it distinctly different from the Greco-Roman stuff, is how it is also feels like a direct attempt to grapple with the fact that there are different stories that present such different and very conflicting versions of these figures, of their origins. Especially when it's like, we had 5,000 years of history where things are happening and slowly changing and evolving, and like that is the real reason these stories are different, because they change as humans tell them, and as stories rise and fall in popularity and people believe and prioritize different things. But when you decide these figures are real and this is what is their history, how do you grapple with, hey, but I thought all 5 of them were born of this like land and the sky and are siblings, but now they're married couples and a son. And so I like the concept of host also does that.
Yes.
Also presents the opportunity to be like, how can all of these things be true?
Yes.
And simultaneously try to be like, but not really incest though, guys. Like not really. It's just in this one they were siblings, but in this one when they were married they were not siblings, because the gods don't actually have that. They are something else.
Yeah.
And imprinting on humans for the narratives, which means if we're having these deities being hosts here, we are essentially being told a different version of the story, wherein instead of these gods being mother, son, husband, wife, they become father, son, sister, brothers in a different capacity, which I also think is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see. It's so interesting, and like everyone said, it's like same but different. Like same ideas, putting them into a different system, and we're going to think about how that plays out. I also think creativity is a word that hasn't necessarily come up in this sentiment in the original 5 books. Like, I think bravery and like, courage to fight the fight again, but creativity, that's a little different. That's the magicians, the scholars, the tricksters that we're in now. Just a couple more things that get revealed in this moment. modern people generally believed to be too weak to be good hosts, something Blood of the Pharaohs. We've talked about that.
But that's our Ptolemy reference. That's closing the loop on that. That's Iskandar saying that the people who were in charge towards the end of Egypt were personally not strong enough to have a good relationship with the gods. Which is also then kind of closing the loop on what Desjardins was saying, where we kind of didn't totally believe him. But this seems plausible to us, that specifically the interplay between the gods and humans became toxic around that point because we were losing recipes, I guess. Like we were losing the scripts for how to make those things, to make those relationships work and be beneficial.
Also, Mom trained here. Mom could see the future. Welcome back, Rachel Elizabeth.
There we go.
This is important. This is like a really rare gift. How is that going to play into all of this? We'll find out. And ultimately, Iskandar tells Sadie that Carter is going to need her guidance, and that when Sadie needs guidance, she should turn to Zia.
I love specifically the moment where Sadie cuts back in and says, like, don't tell me who I'm supposed to guide. Where do I go? That is... I mean, like, it's a little trite, but it's also, I think, genuinely a reversal of so much, like, toxic middle grade tropery. Because she should be asking for guidance. She's 12.
She's 12!
It's not unreasonable to say that she should help somebody, but to not give her the ability to get her own help. To empower this character to ask that, to be bold enough to say to this old wise man, but I need something. You're not going to just leave me here.
Yeah.
I was very moved.
No, and ask for what you need.
Ask for what you need. And for the answer to be Zia.
And then, exactly. And then he hypes up Zia, our cool mentor who we're already obsessed with and want to spend more time with.
That was great.
I want to, with the just, I know we're wrapping up, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot because it's something y'all have presented a lot on the podcast, is like, why did we have to have this, quote, our family is ancient blood of the pharaohs thing for this? It felt unnecessary. And it's like, it feels like a thing that Rick Riordan's trying to introduce to justify why not everyone can do the magic. It's like, not everyone gets to go to Camp Half-Blood because some people are demigods. Not everyone gets to do magician magic because you have to have a pharaoh in your family ancestry. And this statement that they discuss at the end of the chapter of like the Ptolemy, they were not capable of hosting the pharaohs in the same way that the more ancient, quote, truer Egyptian pharaohs could have done.
Yeah, I guess the non-Greek pharaohs, they're saying, had a stronger connection, lineage to the gods, implicitly.
That is the lineage that is allowing the folks who can do magic now to be able to do it, because once upon a time, their ancestors literally could, and that's how they're able to still tap into it. Which I still don't love the whole, you've got to be from special bloodline family. But it does help with the, if you're going to have a special secret society, it's like, why can't everyone do the magic? Why can't I, the reader, do the magic? And you have to create some kind of thing.
I think that's true. I do think that we're at a point with, say, to me, what immediately comes to mind is like the way that we have sort of decomposed comic book superhero ideas into their component parts, like a machine, so easily. The point I'm trying to make with that is that I think we have lots of different ways to tell origin stories that are not just, you were born better than other people. You could, like, maybe Carter and Sadie, like, found an interesting document that only they can read that allows them to understand a lot of lost secrets. You know,
the accident at the start that the parents get involved in, like being exposed to that kind of
maybe their parents wandered into the wrong tomb and they got
bit by a radioactive god spider. Like, no, I think,
or maybe they just like tried really hard. You know, like maybe these are just two people.
Maybe it's someone you can, and someone has to just invite you into the magic club. They found the magic scroll. They did a thing.
Maybe somebody just found them. It's like, oh, you two are like, you have these interesting abilities that you're demonstrating in school and in life. Why don't we like train you, and then you'll be good at this. Like, other people could have also been good at this if they trained.
Yeah, you don't have to have a high M count in order to become a magician.
Fix it in the adaptation.
Anyway, Iskandar says some stuff here that makes it sound like maybe he's gonna die now. And I guess we'll have to find out next time.
You might as well cough up blood. Like,
yeah, he really sounds like somebody who's about to slowly turn into flower petals and blow away in the wind, or
my time has come.
Sadie, I don't feel so good.
This is one of the more egregious cases of like old mentor death foreshadowing, I think, that I've maybe ever read.
It's like, man, we just got this one.
Anyway, we love Iskandar. Short but sweet
We'll miss him.
appearance from him.
Yeah.
So, Darien, thank you for joining us.
Happy to.
Why do you think people should read the Kane Chronicles?
Oh, I've been thinking about my answer to this since you asked it to your first guest this season. I was like, how would I answer it? This is how I'll answer it. The reason you should be reading the Kane Chronicles, dear listener, and I am assuming I am speaking to the younger generation, because that's who we want to read these books, because it's for you. And so the reason you should be listening to this is because, again, as I said, I am to work at an after school program. I see what the youths are into, and I see we have reached the point where the generation is rejecting the millennial culture. I see the fact that you are all wearing Crocs. I understand that this is the cyclical nature of youth, as you reject the things that your parents embraced, which is why you should be embracing the Kane Chronicles, because the millennial Percy Jackson readers did kind of reject it. We did not. I mean, I read them when they came out for sure, but it's still one you'll come across people and be like, oh yeah, I love Percy Jackson. Yeah, I read all of Heroes Olympus. Yeah, no, I never did read the Egyptian one though. Our culture, when it was for us, we did reject it. Therefore, you must embrace it. It is your destiny.
This is actually a phenomenal argument, that this is sort of fresh cultural ground to be broken.
Yeah.
I love it. Darien,
yes.
Where can people find you and your podcasts on social media?
Thank you so much, Erica. Dear wonderful listeners, if you were very into the mythology aspect, into the sibling dynamic as pitched at the top of this particular episode, and you're like, I crave more of that, then Muses of Mythology is for you. It is the podcast where me and my co-host and brother DJ discuss how the ancient myths have remained part of our modern pop culture story and traditions through the lens of Rick Riordan's work. We are currently on the Magnus books, which means we are discussing the Norse ones, which are so very different and so very wild. Y'all, I have beef with Rick Riordan and the fact that he decided he was going to model the war goddess Freya off of a depiction of her that was found in a 14th century text written by some monks that was just a specific hit piece on pagan beliefs. And that was what he did. So if you want to come and learn shit that'll make you mad, you got to do that one. But if you're also like, well, I like this chick, but maybe I don't need her brother, Aragon and Back Again is for you. That's the podcast I host with my friend Lucy Hart, where we talk about the Christopher Paolini's inheritance cycle, chapter by chapter, just revisiting these books, talking about what we liked, what we don't like, just having fun. Hey, it's another series that Disney has decided this was a failed movie. Now we can make it a popular Disney Plus series. So if that's your jam, our show's for you. Get on the cutting edge.
Very exciting. What a phenomenal prospect.
And we're on Instagram. And if you could just, honestly, if you don't want to listen to the show, that's fine. If you could follow the Muses account on Instagram, though, that'd be super cool. We've been hovering like 30 under 1,000 for 6 months. This is me begging now. You don't have to listen to my shows, but if you could go like us on Instagram just to help make one sad 30-year-old woman's dream a reality, that'd be super cool. Thanks, friend.
Darien makes lots of mythology-based real videos, so go follow them. Follow Darien on all of the things.
Thank you,
listen to Darien's podcasts. Thank you for being here, Darien.
Thank you for having me.
Representing the millennials and also the youths that you watch after school. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, all.
Bye.